This is the Jason Verney podcast. I am Jason Verney. This podcast is also known as Flicks or Flicks, and it's brought to you in association with minimoviE.com. That's MINIMOVIE.com. And I find myself in Thailand, and not particularly for this film, which is a Thai-related film and a documentary. The most recent events I've been to film festival-wise were in Korea. I went to Jeonju International Film Festival. I went to the Short Film Festival in Busan, or Busan International Short Film Festival, for one of the events happening there, the opening evening. And before that, in March, I actually had my own film, my 30-minute drama, in a film festival in Bangkok. The film is called Reparation. But this film is, basically, I'm really happy that I saw this film in Thailand. I saw it I've seen it today, and it's the last day of its run in Thailand, or at least, I think it is in Thailand generally, but it was in Chiang Mai that I witnessed it. And as I say, I'm really glad that I saw it, I caught it. I think there's another screening this evening, and I saw it this afternoon. But the film is called Breaking the Cycle, and for anybody who might be listening to this from the UK, you might have seen the news that this is also or has been very recently, or perhaps playing right now still, at the very famous Sheffield Dockfest. This film talks about something regarding Thai politics, and I'm not giving views here one way or the other, but it was something that really appealed to me. If anybody knows me, apart from being a film critic as well as a filmmaker, I'm very passionate about certain things in Korea and other countries, and this is something that also resonated with me because of its subject matter. Now, I will just mention that I read an article before I went to see this today. I didn't want to read too much, but there was something I wanted to clarify. And there's another Korean connection here, because the DMZ Docs Film Festival, which is a pretty well-known film festival in South Korea, that has basically it's what's the word? It's kind of endorsed by, or it's actually, I think, co-produced by, because in the film credits, the lots of Korean names and DMZ Docs comes up. I think other credits go to Pop Pictures. There's some other credits, I can't remember them all. I'm just looking through this article, but in this particular Variety article from June the 6th, it says Thai doc charting rise and fall of country's pro-democracy parties gets rare theatrical release. Our future has been lost. Now, that's not the title. That's just what they've labelled the article. I'm going to give you kind of my review of the film, but the reason I wanted to mention that was because it is unusual in this country where I find myself. I'm here, and I don't mean find myself. Some people go to Asia and find themselves. I'm just saying I'm here, and I'm so thankful that I'm here and I caught it in this country. And the cinema wasn't that full. Bear in mind this has been on every day for a while now, but there was probably a good 30 people in there, a mixture of Thais, mostly Thais, and a few foreigners, and it was, first of all, for what I will say this, I first came to Thailand in 2008, and then I kind of got my passion for Asian cinema. And then that led to Korean cinema, amongst other cinema genres, and world cinema and independent cinema. But one thing I noticed that's changed, of course, you've got I don't know if you know, but whoever's listening to this, if you've been to a Thai cinema before, which all which are normally parts of a multiplex. You know, they're not just standalone cinema. Unfortunately, across the world, these independent cinemas are generally disappearing in favour of these kind of places. But less people stood up for the anthem, the national anthem. You're meant years ago, 16 years ago, people would stand up almost without fail. Bearing in mind there was a different king, but you stand up for the king. And again, I'm not saying anything bad about the king. It's just observations I've made. There was a few people standing up in this. I can't say how many, but I do notice in the 16 years or so that I've come and gone from Thailand. You know, I've been going to Korea for 12 years, and I notice changes, and I notice changes with lots of things, and one of those changes actually comes into play in this film, and that is, of course, the smartphone. Now, that smartphone or the iPhone or what have you came out around the time I started coming to Asia, and so Thai people are obtaining so much information, whether it's for fun, whether it's for political views or political news, whether it's, you know, contacting other people, but they now have this window to the world, as people call these things. And you might be able to hear that vehicle outside us. I am in Thailand, so that's what you hear. And basically, because of this is brought up in the film, that if this person, this is about one particular party, one particular party that was formed about, let's say about 7 years ago, I think, and it was called the Future Foward Party, which now last year has actually been replaced, but with same members, or let's say some of the same members, called the Move Forward Party. So in the documentary, it's the Future Foward Party, and it focuses on the guy Thanathorn. His full name is Thanathorn Juangroongruangkit, and I will refer to him as Thanathorn. So what was mentioned in this was he was trying to bring this. He has brought this massive movement to Thailand, where young people are now wanting change. You know, there's been coups, there's been military situations, there's been a choice of two parties, there's been a non-democratic situation in Thailand for several decades, for ages, and there's been a coup about every 13 years. This is covered in the film. So this very rich guy, Thanathorn, he wanted to do something. You know, he's been given this wealth, but he wanted to create something for the people. And as he states in the film, you know, it was initially aimed at the young people, and I think at some point they realised it has to have an online presence. But a lot of what he did was not online. It was going, you know, it was rallying, going up and down the country to the poor people, to the various different places in Thailand, not just Bangkok. But he made a point of stating that this is for the rich. This is for the poor people, the Hmong tribes, the Karen tribes, the farmers, for everyone, not just the 1%. Now, this is not unique to Thailand, this 1% that is kind of vaguely, you know, it's a thing in the world where the 1% has all the majority of the wealth. And it's quite clear that he was one of those. So he wanted to, and let's say he still wants to, even if the party's changed now, he wanted to, bring about change. And throughout the film, you meet all these different people. His little party grows. And he mentions at one point, I really want to state this, because he mentions, I didn't want to do this. I was quite content. I have the money, but he would much rather be climbing mountains with his family, traveling and with his friends and family, and just enjoying life. And this is mentioned a couple of times in the film, but I thought it was an interesting sort of analogy maybe, that he, he's climbing mountains because he is sort of, this is a mountain that he's climbing, but he becomes loved, and he becomes almost, there becomes a hashtag in the that goes viral. It was called "Far Loves Daddy." Somebody shouts something out in Thai to him, and I think, but I can't swear. I think it was a transgender. Bear in mind, this is Thailand. There's lots of transgender people. Somebody shouted something, and rather than, let's say, one of the more old-fashioned politicians perhaps ignoring it or turning around and raging or something, he turns around, recognises, and treats them like an individual and treats them like everybody else. And this thing that was said was something that translated to "Far Loves Daddy," and this went viral. And I'm sorry if I'm going about this in a roundabout way, but this is the only way. This film touches on so many subjects. It covers 2 hours. There's a lot to take in. I already knew about this, a lot of this, but there's a hell of a lot that I didn't know. But the story really starts in 2014 because that was the last coup, and I suppose a couple of years later this party was formed, this Future Foward Party, and it builds momentum, so much so that when it goes through the elections, it's the third biggest party, the third biggest winner, and the votes are in the millions. And bear in mind, Thailand has a population of approximately, let's say, 70. I mean, it's up and down because there's people that might not be fully registered. It's its own country, it has its own rules or loopholes, but let's say 70 million people. And he was making a point that this is not for the rich, this is for everybody. And it reminded me a bit like Jeremy Corbyn or something in the UK. And there was a point, maybe a decade ago, I didn't used to vote, and there's a character, I'm calling her a character in this film, who is focused on, and she's not the only one in this situation, but she becomes a fan, and she says that she was, I think from a young age, due to what she knew about the politics in this country, she said, I'm not going to get involved in politics. It's makes no difference to her. And when she saw Thanathorn, everything changed, and she creates this. Well, she's one of the many fans, really, but supporters, and she's at his rallies or at his, watching his, she's having gatherings, watching his speeches, and then later on throughout the film, she has this fan meet thing, which he attends, and it's a very, not poignant, but it's a very touching moment. There's lots of touching moments in this film. I was welling up in a few times in this film, and there's some similarities between situations in Korea, in South Korea especially. For example, you've got the obligatory army, the conscription that you that every male has to do in Thailand and in Korea, in South Korea, and now even in England now it's been talked about. It's just crazy at the moment, and this is quite I mentioned the word poignant just now, but this is quite poignant to me because at the moment we're approaching an important British election, and I'm on the fence as to whether to vote, who to vote for. I'm not in the country. What do I do? Have I got the the energy, but and what she said was that these things change. These things changed her. This man came along that everyone was throwing themselves sort of at least with passion, devotion. And there's a bit near the end of the film, bearing in mind quite a few things come up. Now there's situations that come up with the fact that they were loaned some money was loaned to them or donated, and there's something in their constitution that says this shouldn't be allowed, but later on he decides, so this is towards the end of the film, he decides to stand down, and kind of the pressure was getting to him to do that. And when he apologized to his, the people that have been supporting him, and they were like, somebody shouted, "No, you don't apologize. You've done nothing wrong," or something. It's kind of, this is there's a 2-hour film. There's a lot of ground covered, but he had become this saint, this person that the young people were looking for, and not just the young. It turned out that although that was perhaps the initial demographic and aim, it became more than that. Millions of people. And in fact, there was something that I remember seeing in the news a couple of years ago, where the three finger sort of fingers up salute thing, not a salute in an army salute, the 3-finger stance that's featured in the Hunger Games. I think it might be something else as well, but there was a lot of Thailand for the last decade or so has been using that as a kind of, stand up and we want change kind of thing. And I actually thought to myself how it doesn't quite resemble it, but it could, if you put your hand in a certain way, resemble the Democracy Monument in Bangkok, or one of the 4 statues, the 4 identical statues. But it was, there's a lot of this, what this guy is saying, and he wanted to cut out this conscription for men, make it a choice, make it a work choice. You can do it if you want to do it, and help everybody distribute better. There was just lots of people behind him, the sort of LGBTQ and transgender people behind him, the disabled people, wheelchairs, because there's a lot of things that aren't getting done and I won't say this is just Thailand, other places as well, and not enough is done for people that are less able than other people. And so he had all these great policies, and they weren't just policies. I believe, the film, of course, politicians are politicians, but this is it's a very powerful documentary. And the interesting thing was, and perhaps I know this because I've kind of touched on video art and documentaries myself. I'm putting something together at the moment to do with the Sewol ferry in South Korea, which was something that happened 10 years ago, where 250 children and about 50 adults, including teachers and crew, were told to stay put on a ferry, and they sunk, the ferry sunk, and they were told to wait for instructions, and they took they took those words and stayed there and drowned. And I've been an activist with my friends in the UK, some Korean, some non-Korean, every month for 10 years. And obviously when I'm in Asia, I don't do that, but I join in other ways. But what I'm saying is there was I can relate to it in that respect. There was a lot of stuff, powerful things that were being said. But back to this Variety article, because it mentioned that a lot of Thailand doesn't normally have this kind of film released, and there's mentioned that I saw a great Thai film recently, and it wasn't the normal thing, but you get a lot of the Hollywood tentpoles, as they call them, the Marvel films and Thai commercial titles, but you rarely get art house films or documentaries. And so this in itself was a major thing. And not only that, it's been doing the festivals, as I mentioned earlier, and bringing it home to Thailand and showing it in Thai cinemas was what... Yes, I'm just looking for the words. The festival platforms were great, but honestly, the film didn't feel finished until we brought it home to Thailand. This is the pair of the filmmakers. They said on Saturday, I'm reading from this, and the wide release in theatres will be its real finish line. So, and it then goes on to say the dissolution of Future Foward Party gave our film an ending. Because I knew how it kind of ended, but it then moves to the Move Forward Party, which is now doing very well in Thailand, or at least it was last year. And so there's so many little things that happen in this film. There's so much positivity, and not just from I'm an outsider in this country and Korea and other Asian countries that I'm interested in, and other countries I'm interested in, not just in Asia, but it just gives hope. And this is mentioned in the film. It gives hope for change. And there's even a comparison made at the end of the film that, an iPod, when the iPod, they use that, yes, there were other versions of the iPod, but the iPod became this change in how people listened to music, or how people understood things. And this event, or this party that came about, that is now in a different form, is a way of Thailand changing in the same way that these have changed people. It says here, just going back to that article, young people have had to grow up with the NCPO. This is the military government and its civilian successor. Some have died by suicide, others have lost their youth in prison. And another thing this film touches on is, and this is another thing that I thought about with Korea, there were some protesters, some as young as 12, and they were sentenced, or they were prosecuted, rather, whatever the word I'm meant to be using there. And it reminded me of the Gwangju uprising massacre in South Korea. It reminded me of Jeju, that was in a different way, but, and of course there's been the Hong Kong situation and other things that have been happening in Asia and around the world. I really wanted to do this today as we approach the end of June, because it's middle of June, but it will be the end of June by the time I get this uploaded, etc. And it had its premiere in Hot Docs in Canada, so that's a pretty well-known documentary festival, and as it says here, opens now on 150 screens across Thailand. This article's from a couple of weeks ago, but I managed to see it, and as I say, I'm so glad I managed to see it. Yesterday I wasn't really up for seeing it for some other reasons that were happening to me, but it doesn't take a lot sometimes for me to get emotional, and perhaps because this country means a lot to me, it hasn't had the same. I often go for the underdog in my themes or my stories, or just my anything activism I might do. Thailand hasn't had the attack of the USA from the Vietnamese, the Vietnam War, like Cambodia and Laos and Vietnam has. I mean, that's tragic, and Thailand has been neutral in many ways. Unfortunately, it also had the troops from the USA coming to Thailand, and things like prostitution, and in Thailand that exploded from this small thing that it was, and in some ways it is the underdog in that way, that it's, I say I go for the sort of marginalised, but that's a small part of Thailand. And Thailand for me, it's the people, it's the food, it's the way of life, it's and even in the film, they're showing you the date. Thailand has a different date to what we used to in the West, so it's now 2567. It's year 2567, whereas most of the other places in the world, it's 2024, and it's a highly Buddhist country, and you've got this transgender thing, which is not unique. South America has certain parts of South America that's huge as well. In Thailand, it has a lot going for it. It's meant to be the free land. Thailand is like free land, and if it's not totally free, then is it free? Is it the land of the free? Is a very different land of the free to what America is meant to be, or the North America is meant to be, or the USA. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm sure there's some things I've missed out of the film, but it's very well put together. Oh yes, I was going to mention, it actually came about by accident. I was just saying, sorry, when I led on to the Sewol ferry, I was talking about a project that I was putting together, and they were trying. It says here the pair of filmmakers, the two of them, they self-funded the doc for the first 3 of the 6 years it took them to make it. Then it attracted support from Tan Ian Kiam Foundation, the Singapore International Film Festival, SEA Doc, Pure In Pictures, and White Light Studio. Other credits go to Pop Pictures, who I mentioned earlier, Pop, DMZ Docs, who I mentioned, and Docs by the Sea. And there's producers mentioned here. But it said somewhere that I'm just trying to find it. We saw our project as being in the mould of Joshua, which was a documentary about student politician Joshua Wong in Hong Kong, and started making our film, not knowing where it would end. Later it became a duty. We didn't know any better. That's what these 2 first-time filmmakers said. And yeah, they were just following. I think they were following him. They were following Thanathorn with his I think his his actual statements, his speeches and what have you, but they were so intrigued by what was happening, so they continued to make it, and it became a full-length documentary. So that's it. I'm going to call it a day with this little review. It's a very powerful documentary. I'm hoping it's listed on mubi.com, mubi.com, but not as available yet, like the trailers there and trailers on YouTube. But it's also, I think it will go to Mubi eventually, maybe Netflix, I don't know, but it will maybe both, because sometimes these things go around the houses, indie platforms and other places. So that's it. I wanted to just mention that. It's a subject I'm passionate about, a country I'm passionate about. I've seen these changes over the years with people, with technology, with, more passion. Sorry, not more passion. They've had more passion, but maybe they now feel that the world is changing. The world is changing. Certain countries can change individually, and that's what gives, as I say, gives the Thai people and everybody hope. So I will say thank you very much for listening and for reading minimovie.com if you stumble across that after this or anyway, and I'll just bid you farewell. Thank you. Kopan nakrap.